Now, I cannot believe I'm saying this, but we have just survived the 6 weeks of zero UFC content, alright? Round of applause to everybody who survived for this long, because now we are on UFC 324 fight week, alright? And if you guys forgot, I'm going to just break this down for you. I'm going to be predicting every single fight on this card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the video. Alright, starting off, we got Adam Fugitt versus Ty Miller. If you guys watched the Dana White Contender Series, you know who to go with. But if you haven't, alright, just pick Ty Miller for this one. Because Ty Miller, he looks decent, alright? His hands are pretty slick. Do I think Ty Miller's this exceptional talent that we might see challenge the rankings of any elite fighters in the future? Not really, but I do think he's good enough to beat Adam Fugitt. And I think he's good enough to get a KO win over Adam Fugitt, because Adam Fugitt, I think his chin is pretty cooked, alright? I know he's been fighting elite level competition like Michael Morales, Mike Malott, and Islam Dulatov, but, you know, you just can't be getting finished over and over again in a lot of your fights. And even in the fights that he wins, he looks incredibly mid in them. Like in the Josh Quinlan fight, I thought that was like two of the worst welterweights on the roster, where Adam Fugitt was able to win because he landed slightly more. That's my overall take on that fight. So I haven't been really too impressed with Adam Fugitt's career, whereas Ty Miller, like I don't know where he's at in terms of like skill level, but I do think he looks better than Adam Fugitt. So I'm going to go with Ty Miller to get a round 2 or 3 TKO. Like maybe it goes to a decision, but I think if he fights Adam Fugitt, it's bound to be a KO. So I'm going to go with Ty Miller to get a TKO in the later rounds. Alright, now moving on, we got Ricky Turcios versus Cameron Smotherman. Now, before you guys trash Ricky Turcios automatically, he's not as bad as you think. Alright, he's actually 2-3 in the UFC, and he has a win over Brady Heisman. Now, I'm not exactly sure how that fight played out, but the fact that you went to a decision with Brady Heisman and won the split decision against him, I think that's pretty impressive. That being said, I cannot pick Ricky Turcios to win a fight in 2026 because I don't think Ricky Turcios can really take damage in 2026. Alright, a lot of Ricky Turcios fights you'll see, he just acts like he does stuff. Meanwhile, he lands on the guard like 20 plus times in a quick exchange against his opponents. Alright, whereas Cameron Smotherman, I don't think he's all that. You know, losing to Surrey City is not a great look. And then he got schooled in the wrestling by Ricky Simone. But I do think that Cameron Smotherman can at least pressure forward and try to exchange in the pocket, which is something that Ricky Turcios will avoid like the plague. And it's not like Ricky Turcios has any exceptional grappling to fall back on as well. So I'm going to go with Cameron Smotherman to get the job done. I'm going to say by decision. All right, maybe he chins Ricky Turcios, but Ricky Turcios hasn't been chinned yet. So I'm going to go with Cameron Smotherman to win this fight via 30-27, 29-28 decision. All right, now up next we got heavyweight Colby Covington versus Denzel Freeman. I'm just going to go with heavyweight Colby Covington on this one because he's actually pretty good. All right, and I can't say the same thing for Denzel Freeman, considering he took this Polish bloke on short notice who, I'm going to say, isn't UFC caliber. Like, he took him to a very shitty decision. And whereas Josh Hokit, is he fighting complete schmucks that shouldn't belong in the UFC? Yes, but he looks good doing it. And I do think that Josh Hokit has the ability to mix in the wrestling, which I'm just going to say, Denzel Freeman, I don't think he does any sort of wrestling training, judging from his last fight. So I think Josh Hokit is just going to be the better mixed martial artist. He can determine where the fight goes, and I could see Josh Hokit just drowning Denzel Freeman in a high cardio pace, similar to Colby Covington, and I think that Josh Hokit will beat Denzel Freeman. I'm going to say round 2 TKO by ground and pound. Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. But if it goes to a decision, I'm not going to be shocked. But either way, I'm going to pick Josh Hokit to win this fight. Alright, finally we got some interesting fights here between Michael Johnson and Alexander Hernandez. Now, I feel like Michael Johnson can win this fight. And I have picked Michael Johnson to win fights in the past, but I'm going to go with Alexander Hernandez on this one because Michael Johnson, I feel like he does well in very situational matchups. Like, he knocked out Ottoman Azaitar. Alright, Ottoman Azaitar shouldn't belong in the UFC. Alright, he beat Darius Flowers by decision. Darius Flowers shouldn't belong in the UFC. Now, he did beat Daniel Zellhuber, which is a very good win. However, Daniel Zellhuber fights completely different from Alexander Hernandez, alright? Daniel Zellhuber is a range merchant who's just very lanky and throws head kicks nonstop. That's not what Alexander Hernandez does. Alexander Hernandez will meet you in the pocket and will try to trade with you, or he'll try to shoot takedowns if he knows that he's getting outclassed on the feet. And I think that Alexander Hernandez is overall the more well-rounded mixed martial artist, and I'm going to trust that Alexander Hernandez can mix the martial arts in order to slow down Michael Johnson and beat him by 29-28 decision. And not to mention, Alexander Hernandez has some power in his hands, alright? And Michael Johnson has been getting chinned in a couple of fights over the last few years, so I wouldn't be shocked if Alexander Hernandez knocks out Michael Johnson, but I'm going to go with the safer pick, which is Hernandez winning this fight via decision. I'm going to say 29-28. Maybe Michael Johnson does well in the first round, but by rounds 2 and 3, I'm expecting Hernandez to make sure that Michael Johnson slows down by implementing wrestling and overall controlling the pace of the fight. Alright, now, moving on, we got Alex Perez versus Charles Johnson. I'm gonna go with Charles Johnson on this one. Now, I can see Alex Perez winning this fight because Perez is a very crafty vet, and he was winning against Asul Mabayev prior to getting guillotined in the third round. But I think that Charles Johnson is faster, he's lankier, and he plays the cardio game a little bit better than Alex Perez. Alex Perez, in my opinion, he does very well against people who like to shoot takedowns and not strike on the feet. Alright, that's what Alex Perez primarily does well against, or he's good at finding the chin against very chinny guys like Mateusz Nicolau. Alright, I don't think Charles Johnson's chinny like Mateusz Nicolau, and this is going to be a primary fight on the feet, and I think that Charles Johnson, using his reach, his speed, and overall his shot selection, has the better tools to beat Alex Perez in a 3-round fight. So I'm going to go with Charles Johnson to beat Alex Perez. I'm going to say 29-28 decision. Maybe he gets a TKO in the later rounds, similar to how he beat Loner Kavanaugh and Joshua Van. But either way, I'm going to go with Charles Johnson to outstrike Alex Perez on the feet and get himself a top 10 opponent in the flyweight division right after. Alright, now up next, we got Nikita Krylov versus Modestas Bukauskas. Alright, I know Modestas Bukauskas is on a long win streak, but I'm still picking Nikita Krylov in this fight. Alright, even though Nikita Krylov has been getting chinned a lot, getting chinned by Reyes and then getting chinned by Bukauskas right after, it's kind of concerning considering Nikita Krylov was the unstoppable marauder prior to taking a long hiatus. But the thing is, Modestas Bukauskas is arguably a much lower level than Dominic Reyes or Bogdan Gushkov, alright? Like, if you look at Modestas Bukauskas' recent wins, he TKO'd Paul Craig and Rafael Sequeira. Welcome to the club. Everybody at this point has TKO'd Paul Craig and Rafael Sequeira. Alright, and even the Ion Cutelaba fight, I thought Ion Cutelaba beat Modestas Bukauskas. And outside of that, Modestas Bukauskas, he hasn't really done much outside of TKOing schmucks and going to a very iffy decision with Ion Cutelaba. Whereas Nikita Krylov, sure, he's kind of lost his chin at this point, but when has Modestas Bukauskas ever been this KO artist, alright? Modestas Bukauskas has always been this point striker that kind of breaks to pressure, and that's what Nikita Krylov does very well. He is the pressure guy. I know that Reyes was able to chin him, but that's because Reyes has the perfect step-back left hand. I don't see Modestas Bukauskas ever landing a step-back left hand like that. So I'm going to say that Nikita Krylov, he's going to break Modestas Bukauskas with pressure. I'm expecting a finish from Nikita Krylov in this fight, alright? Because, again, Bukauskas is a lot lower of a level than the guys that Nikita Krylov's been getting chinned by. So I'm going to go with Nikita Krylov. I'm going to say submission or knockout, right? Because he can do both. I'm going to go with knockout on this one just to be safe. Like, maybe he shows us a little bit of his grappling, but knowing Nikita Krylov, he's only going to do that if he gets rocked really badly. And outside of that, Nikita Krylov is probably going to trade in the pocket with Modestas Bukauskas. And I think Nikita Krylov will beat Modestas Bukauskas by round 1 or 2 KO. Alright, now moving on, we got Ateba Gautier versus Andrey Pulyaev. I just need to go with Ateba Gautier on this one. Now, I will say this, Andrey Pulyaev isn't as bad as the schmucks that Gautier has been TKOing to the Shadow Realm, like Tristan Vines, Robert Valentin, and Jose Medina. But Pulyaev is not exactly the step up in competition where I'm going like, yeah, he could kind of test Ateba Gautier. Because Andrey Pulyaev, like, he's like slightly above bottom of the barrel. And while he can beat people like Nick Klein, at the end of the day, it's Nick Klein. And every time Andrey Pulyaev fights someone within the top 25-ish of the division, like Christian Leroy Duncan, he gets absolutely schooled. And I do think that Ateba Gautier is around the top 25-ish level of the middleweight division. And not to mention, Ateba Gautier is one of the scariest prospects to be out on the lookout for. Alright? And I understand that he's KO'd nothing but schmucks. And Andrey Pulyaev is better than the schmucks Gautier's KO'd. But I don't think that skill level is that substantially better to the point where I can see Pulyaev getting Gautier frustrated and testing Gautier over the course of a 3-round fight. So I'm going to go with Ateba Gautier to win this via round 2 TKO. Maybe in the first round, Pulyaev does a very good job circling around, throwing the kicks at Ateba Gautier's forearms, making Gautier overall slow down a little bit. But once Pulyaev gets tired from backing up nonstop, Gautier will hunt him down, and he will send Pulyaev to the Shadow Realm, just like every single one of his victims in the past. Alright, Ateba Gautier by round 2 TKO. Alright, now this next one is kind of weird. Alright, Umar Nurmagomedov versus Deiveson Figuereido. And I'm not talking about the matchup itself. Like, I'm talking about the fact that this is on the prelims of UFC 324. I don't really understand that, but I'm going to go with Umar Nurmagomedov on this one. Like, Deiveson Figuereido, like, I just think he's way past his prime at this point. Like, sure, you could say that, oh, Figuereido has this one-punch knockout power, alright? And Umar Nurmagomedov has been getting dropped a lot in his fights, but the thing is, when's the last time Figuereido knocked someone out? I don't think he's knocked someone out at bantamweight. And Umar Nurmagomedov, you could say that he gets dropped a lot, but he always recovers. All right, there's a reason why he's only 18-1, and his one loss was to Marab via decision. Like, I think Umar Nurmagomedov is very underrated overall. Not to say that Umar Nurmagomedov's gonna be Pilter Yan or anything delusional like that. But I do think that Umar Nurmagomedov should comfortably beat Deiveson Figuereido. Like, on the feet, Figuereido, if he isn't knocking you out with one punch, he just takes his time way too much. He has low output. Like, he's very slow now that he's, 38 years old as well. And in the ground, sure, you can say that Figueiredo's, pretty good at grappling. But I think Umar Nurmagomedov can cancel that out. And I can even see Umar Nurmagomedov getting more of the dominant wrestling positions in this fight. I'm going to go with Umar Nurmagomedov to get a decision. Alright, if he gets a submission win, I'll be shocked, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm going to go with Umar Nurmagomedov to beat Deiveson Figuereido pretty comfortably, 30-27 via decision. Alright, now moving on, we got Arnold Allen versus Jan Silva. Alright, this is a very interesting fight, to say the least. Alright, not just because of the stylistic matchup, but also the fact that they are two polar opposites of the autism spectrum. If I had to pick one of these guys, though, I'm slightly leaning towards Jan Silva at the moment. Alright, and don't get me wrong, I would love to see Arnold Allen win this fight, but the problem is, A, he hasn't fought in over a year and a half now, and B, he has been getting dropped a lot in his fights, alright? Like, Jan Silva, you could say, oh, he couldn't even drop Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez has a granite chin. He has the pure blockhead chin that is impossible to KO unless you're Ilya Taboria. So not being able to knock out Diego Lopez, like, I'm not going to fault you for that. However, Jean Silva, he's a very good striker. I think that's that's something that a lot of people don't want to admit, because Jean Silva isn't exactly the most popular fighter right now. But Jean Silva's very good. Alright, I think he has better shot selection than Arnold Allen. Like, Arnold Allen, to me, he looks faster, and I can see him getting the better of the exchanges early on, but it's not like Arnold Allen's, like, exceptional when it comes to pushing the pace and breaking guys as the fight progresses. It's not like Arnold Allen really mixes in the grappling all that much. If this is a primary striking fight, I just don't see Arnold Allen being able to put away Jean Silva, and I think that's what you need in order to stop a guy like Jean Silva from TKOing your ass, right? Because Jean Silva, he's so good at just staying patient and picking his shots. I understand that the autism rage got the best of him in his fight with Diego Lopez, but that's because Diego Lopez, again, he has a blockhead chin, and Jean Silva literally threw the kitchen sink at him, yet somehow Lopez went through that without so much as a scratch. Alright, whereas Arnold Allen, if he tries the same thing, I just imagine him getting dropped multiple times before the fight getting called off due to a TKO. Alright, if Arnold Allen's going to win this fight, he's going to have to go to a decision and just not get clipped for 15 minutes, alright? Because the second he gets clipped, he's probably going to drop, because Arnold Allen, he has been a little bit chinny to say the least. But overall, Jean Silva, I think, is going to be able to TKO Arnold Allen in the second round. But I'm going to say this, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that Arnold Allen wins this fight. Alright, now moving on, we got Natalia Silva versus Rose Namajunas. The main card on a pay-per-view for some reason. Like, yeah, I'm just going to go with Natalia Silva. Like, I just can't pick Rose Namajunas to be any sort of elite level flyweight on the current roster. Like, I don't see Rose Namajunas being able to outmuscle Natalia Silva in the grappling. Like, that's the one thing Natalia Silva hasn't been tested yet. And on the feet, Silva, I think, is way faster than current Rose Namajunas. Now, if this were, like, Rose Namajunas when she was actually training with Trevor Whitman, like, I would say something different. But that's not the Rose Namajunas we have right now. Alright, this is Rose Namajunas who got groomed by Pat Barry. Alright, who got her career ruined by Pat Barry, to be specific. So I'm gonna go with Natalia Silva to outkick and point Rose Namajunas for 3 rounds. Alright, like, I don't know how good or bad Natalia Silva's grappling is either, because no one's really been able to get her to the ground. And I don't see Rose Namajunas being able to do that, because she is, at the end of the day, a very small flyweight. So yeah, I'm going to go with Natalia Silva to beat Rose Namajunas by outpointing her on the feet for 3 rounds. Moving on, we got Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Derrick Lewis. Now, Waldo Cortez Acosta, I will say, he's looked pretty impressive over the last couple of months. Like, I didn't think much of him ever since he lost to Sergey Pavlovich, but he's made quick turnarounds, and he beat Ante Dalia, which I think that's a very good win. And then he TKO'd Shamil Gaziev in the first round on short notice a month later. Now he's fighting Derrick Lewis, which I will say, Derrick Lewis has the ability to fluke something out of his ass in this type of matchup. However, I do think that Waldo Cortez is overall the much better fighter, and I think that Waldo Cortez Acosta, as long as he doesn't get flying knee TKO'd by Derrick Lewis, or some fluke shit like that, Waldo Cortez Acosta should be able to outpoint Derrick Lewis and possibly TKO him, because Waldo Cortez Acosta's power has been improving. So I'm going to go with Cortez Acosta to win this fight. It's hard to say whether or not he can TKO Derrick Lewis, but considering how much improvement he's made in terms of knockout potential, I'm going to go with Cortez Acosta to TKO Derrick Lewis within I'm going to say the second round. All right, I'm going to go with round 2 TKO for Waldo Cortez Acosta. Moving on to the co-main event, we got Sean O'Malley versus Song Yadong. Alright, now the one thing I'm interested in is how will these guys look in the grappling? because both of these guys upload a lot of grappling footage both on their Instagram and on their YouTube channel, but you don't really see them use it in most of their fights, alright? And that's what I'm really interested in seeing, alright? But assuming that this fight's going to be on the feet because neither of them really grapple in most of their fights, I'm going to have to go with Sean O'Malley on this one because I think Sean O'Malley, he's just way slicker and he's way faster than Song Yadong. Alright, sure, you could say that O'Malley didn't look good in this fight with Merab and he got outstruck by Merab before getting submitted, but Merab is really good. I understand that he's not exactly the prettiest striker, but he makes shit work. Alright, and I don't see Song Yadong having the same threat because the takedown threat isn't the same like a Merab Dvalishvili. Alright, Sean O'Malley, if it's a pure fight on the feet, I don't think that many people beat him. Alright, keep in mind, even though he got a robbery win over Petr Yan, he was outstriking Petr Yan on the feet, which is crazy to say. So I think that Sean O'Malley will be able to beat Song Yadong in a pure stand-up fight. Again, the grappling is the biggest interest, but I haven't seen either of these guys really implement their grappling games in UFC so far. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Sean O'Malley to pick apart Song Yadong over the course of 3 rounds. Song Yadong has the puncher's chance, assuming this fight's straight up on the feet. But when's the last time Song Yadong's really TKO'd somebody? Alright, that's what I want to say. So I think Sean O'Malley is overall the slicker striker. He's longer. He has more height. Alright, he's faster as well. So I think that Song Yadong is going to have a long night for him unless he heavily grapples. But I haven't seen him do it so far. So I have to go with Sean O'Malley based on the footage that I see. Last but not least, we got Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett. I'm going to go with Paddy Pimblett on this one. Like, I understand that Paddy Pimblett doesn't deserve to fight for an interim belt. That Paddy Pimblett's basically the UFC industry plan. That Paddy Pimblett, you know, he will get slimed out by anybody who is like top 3 in the UFC lightweight division. However, I think Paddy Pimblett's better than Justin Gaethje. Right? Justin Gaethje, at this point, it is really hard to pick him against any sort of elite grappler. And sure, you could say that, oh, the only times Gaethje's really lost to elite grapplers is against Charles Oliveira and Khabib Nurmagomedov. But the problem is that it's the way that he's getting submitted, right? Getting knocked down by Charles Oliveira before getting your back taken and getting rear naked choked, alright, that's one thing. But getting triangled by Khabib Nurmagomedov, like I understand that Khabib Nurmagomedov is really good, but like, come on, dog. I'm not saying that Paddy Pimblett's gonna be a better fighter than Khabib Nurmagomedov all time, but I think there's a very recognizable pattern for this fight in Paddy Pimblett. Alright? I think Paddy Pimblett, if he takes Justin Gaethje down, he's just gonna ragdoll Justin Gaethje and submit him with a triangle or an armbar, whatever he wants. And even on the feet, like, sure, you can say that, oh, Justin Gaethje's way superior to Paddy Pimblett. And Paddy Pimblett's striking defense is kind of sus, to say the least. But the thing is, Gaethje has not got a TKO, like, ever since he TKO'd Dustin Poirier. Like, and that's his only TKO win over the course of 5 years. So even though Justin Gaethje is better on the feet, I just don't see a world where Gaethje is able to keep the fight standing for 5 rounds straight without getting taken down in the process. And in that process, I expect Paddy Pimblett to twist up Justin Gaethje like a pretzel because Gaethje's jiu-jitsu, I must say it, it's practically non-existent as far as UFC caliber jiu-jitsu. So I'm going to go with Paddy Pimblett to sub Justin Gaethje by the second round. And by the end of this, Paddy Pimblett will be called a UFC interim champion in the lightweight division. Which, let's just say it, he shouldn't be an interim champion because he's probably going to lose to anybody like Ilia Topuria, Arman Tsarukyan, as well as the winner between Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway. Alright, that's going to be it for this video. If you guys want to see more videos like this, please make sure to like and subscribe so we can monetize this channel. But otherwise, leave any comments down below for video suggestions. And otherwise, I will see you guys next time. Peace.